The smell of chalk dust and old wooden desks filled the classroom as the students shuffled into their seats, laughter echoing down the narrow hallways. It was just another regular day in the high school, the kind of day where lessons dragged on and minds drifted far away from equations and textbooks. The math teacher, Mr. Wallace, stood tall at the front, adjusting his tie and preparing his notes. He was a man known for his sharp tongue and strict discipline, respected by some but feared by most. His jokes often carried a sting, and today would be no different. At the back of the room, moving quietly with her mop and bucket, was Angela, the janitor. She wore her usual dark uniform, her hair tied back neatly, her expression calm and focused on her work. She had been in this school for years, always cleaning the floors, wiping the boards, and making sure the classrooms looked spotless. Many of the students barely noticed her, and those who did often paid little attention. To them, she was just part of the background, someone who came and went without a voice in their world of teenage chatter. But Angela was not as ordinary as she appeared. Beneath that quiet exterior was a mind sharper than most in that classroom. She carried secrets of her own, stories of sacrifice, hardship, and dreams that never had the chance to bloom. Yet she never spoke of them. She worked silently with dignity because life had given her heavy responsibilities, and she had chosen to bear them without complaint. As Mr. Wallace wrote a complicated calculus problem on the board, the students groaned. The equation stretched across the chalkboard like a monster waiting to swallow their confidence. Numbers, symbols, and variables twisted together into something few of them could even begin to understand. The teacher smirked, turning to the class. "Who can solve this?" he asked, his tone both challenging and mocking. Not a single hand went up. The students shifted nervously, whispering and shaking their heads. Calculus was a nightmare to most of them, and the silence only seemed to fuel the teacher's smugness. Then his eyes drifted to Angela, who was mopping quietly near the corner. A mischievous grin crept across his face. "You there?" he called, out loudly, pointing his finger toward her. "Why don't you give it a try? Surely even a janitor can handle a little calculus, right?" The class erupted with laughter. Some students covered their mouths, others whispered cruel remarks, and a few simply laughed out loud. They all thought it was a joke. After all, how could a janitor, someone who cleaned floors, even begin to solve a problem that advanced students struggled with? Angela froze for a moment, her hand tightening around the mop handle. She looked up slowly, her eyes meeting the teacher's with a calm steadiness that surprised him. There was no anger, no embarrassment, just quiet strength. She set the mop aside, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked toward the front of the classroom. The room grew quieter, the laughter fading into curiosity. The students leaned forward in their chairs, waiting to see her stumble, to see her fail, to have their amusement confirmed. Mr. Wallace crossed his arms, certain that this little performance would end quickly. Angela picked up a piece of chalk. It felt strange in her hand, as though years of forgotten memories were pressing into her fingers. For a moment she stood still, staring at the board, the white dust marking her fingertips. Then she began to write. Her movements were steady, confident. Step by step she broke the equation down, transforming the mess of numbers and symbols into clean, clear logic. Each line flowed naturally into the next, her handwriting precise and elegant. The students watched in silence as the impossible began to make sense. Murmurs spread across the room, disbelief written on every face. "Wait. She knows what she's doing," one student whispered. "No way." "She's solving it," another replied, their voice hushed with shock. Mr. Wallace's smirk faded. He uncrossed his arms and leaned forward, watching closely as the janitor continued. His eyes widened as realization dawned. She wasn't guessing. She wasn't fumbling. She was teaching. Angela paused halfway, turning to the students as if she had been standing at the front of the class her whole life. "The trick," she said softly, her voice carrying a calm authority, "is to look at the structure. Don't be afraid of how big it looks. Break it into smaller pieces and it becomes much easier." Her words carried more weight than the chalk strokes on the board. For the first time, the students were not confused. They actually understood. She continued until the very last step, her hand never hesitating. Finally, she circled the correct answer, placed the chalk down gently and stepped back. The entire classroom fell silent. Not one laugh remained. Not one mocking whisper dared to surface. All eyes were fixed on her, the janitor who had just solved what none of them could. Angela glanced at the board, then at the students, and finally at Mr. Wallace. "Sometimes," she said softly, "people are more than what they seem." The silence lingered. Then slowly a student began clapping. Another joined. Soon the whole room filled with applause, hesitant at first, then strong and sincere. The teacher stood, frozen, his pride crushed, his authority challenged in a way he never imagined. Angela simply smiled, nodded politely, and returned to her mop. She didn't ask for applause. She didn't need it. For her, solving the problem was not about proving anyone wrong. It was simply about showing the truth. But for everyone in that classroom, the truth had shaken them to their core. The woman they thought invisible, the janitor they never noticed, had just revealed herself to be something extraordinary. What none of them knew yet was that this moment was only the beginning. The news of what happened in Mr. Wallace's classroom did not stay contained within four walls. By the time the final bell rang, the story had already spread through the school like wildfire. Students whispered in the hallways, some still stunned, others excited, and many struggling to make sense of what they had witnessed. The janitor, the woman who had always been in the background of their lives, had solved a calculus problem with ease and grace. Angela walked through those same hallways as if nothing had happened. She carried her bucket, her mop, and her cleaning cloths, nodding politely to the few who dared to meet her eyes. But something was different now. She could feel it in the way the whispers followed her, in the way students glanced at her with wide eyes instead of indifference. She had spent years being invisible, and now suddenly she was the center of attention. Later that evening, when the last students had gone home and the lights in the classrooms dimmed, Angela sat alone in the teacher's lounge, folding her rag neatly. She should have felt triumphant, but instead she felt the weight of memories pressing down on her heart. Solving that problem had not been about pride. It had been a reminder of a life she once dreamed of, a life she thought she had lost forever. Years ago, she had been just like those students, full of energy and hope. Her love for mathematics had started early, with puzzles, numbers, and problems that challenged her to think differently. Teachers had praised her talent, professors had encouraged her, and she had once stood at the threshold of something big. She had earned a scholarship to a prestigious university, a place where her passion could have grown into a career. But life had other plans. Her parents' sudden illness changed everything. Bills piled up, responsibilities grew heavy, and her dreams were forced to step aside. She became the caretaker for her younger siblings, working every job she could find, waiting tables, cleaning houses, scrubbing hallways. Her dream of mathematics was folded away like a fragile letter she couldn't bring herself to tear apart. She promised herself she would return to it one day, but the years had slipped away faster than she imagined. Now here she was, back in a classroom, but not as a student or a teacher, just a janitor. Yet for a brief moment, with chalk in her hand, she had felt the fire again. The numbers had come alive, and her mind had remembered what it was like to be free. The next morning, when she returned to school, the atmosphere was different. Students whispered louder, and instead of ignoring her, they watched her with curiosity. Some even smiled at her, and a few brave ones greeted her politely. But the strangest reaction came from Mr. Wallace himself. He avoided her gaze entirely, his once sharp voice quieter than usual. During lunch, a small group of students approached Angela while she was cleaning the cafeteria tables. One of them, a shy boy named Daniel, clutched his math textbook in his hands. "Miss Angela," he said hesitantly, Could you maybe help us with some problems? We've got a test coming up, and the way you explained yesterday, it just made sense." Angela looked at the group, their hopeful faces shining with sincerity. For a moment she hesitated. She had never imagined herself as a teacher, not really. But something inside her stirred. She nodded gently. All right, after my shift I'll meet you in the library. That evening, Angela found herself sitting at a table surrounded by students. They leaned in eagerly, watching as she explained equations in a way that felt clear and alive. She didn't just give them answers. She taught them how to see patterns, how to understand the rhythm of numbers. Her patience and warmth drew them in, and slowly more students began to join. Within days, her small group grew into something larger. Word spread that the janitor could teach math better than the teachers themselves. Students who once struggled began improving, their confidence rising. For many, she was not just a tutor, but an inspiration, proof that knowledge could come from the most unexpected places. But not everyone was pleased. Some teachers grumbled about the attention she was getting, their pride bruised by the idea that a janitor could outshine them. Mr. Wallace, in particular, struggled with humiliation. His authority had been shaken, and though he had tried to dismiss the incident as a lucky guess, the truth gnawed at him. He knew what he had seen. Angela's brilliance was undeniable. One afternoon, unable to contain his frustration, he confronted her in the hallway. "You need to stop this," he said sharply, his voice low but firm. "Tutoring students without permission is not your job. You're here to clean, not to play teacher." Angela looked at him calmly. There was no anger in her eyes, only quiet resolve. "I'm not taking anyone's job, Mr. Wallace. I'm just helping the students who ask for help. Isn't that what a school is supposed to be about?" His face tightened, but he had no answer. He walked away, his footsteps heavy with pride and bitterness. Despite the resistance, Angela continued. The students refused to let her stop, and their grades began to show remarkable improvement. Teachers who once doubted her now saw the results, and some began to soften, realizing that perhaps this woman had something special to offer. One day, the school principal, Mrs. Jenkins, heard about Angela's tutoring sessions and decided to see for herself. She walked quietly into the library where Angela was teaching a group of students. She watched as Angela explained complex concepts with such ease and kindness that the students lit up with understanding. It was a rare gift, one even seasoned teachers struggled to master. When the session ended, Mrs. Jenkins approached her. "Angela," she said gently, "you have a gift. More than a gift. You have the heart of a teacher. I want to help you. Use it." Angela blinked in surprise. She had never expected such words. For years, she had buried her dreams, convinced they no longer belonged to her. But now, for the first time, someone was offering her a way back. That night, as she walked home under the soft glow of the streetlights, Angela's heart was heavy, yet hopeful. She thought about her parents, about the sacrifices she had made, about the years that had slipped by. Could it really be possible? Could she still become the person she had once dreamed of being? She didn't have the answers yet. But she knew one thing. The fire inside her was awake again. And it was only growing stronger. By the end of the week, Angela was no longer just the quiet janitor in the background. She had become the woman everyone whispered about, the one who turned a classroom full of laughter into stunned silence. The story had traveled beyond the walls of the school. Parents were hearing it from their children at dinner tables. Students from other classes were curious to see her. Some even peeked into the library during her tutoring sessions, astonished by the sight of a janitor explaining mathematics with the confidence of a professor. But for Angela, this sudden attention was overwhelming. She had lived her life in the shadows for so long that stepping into the light felt unnatural. Every time she heard the whispers or noticed the stares, she remembered the years of silence, the years where no one cared to know who she really was. It was easier then. Being invisible meant no one could expect anything of her. But now, everything was different. One afternoon, while she was cleaning the science lab, a small group of students entered quietly. They weren't laughing or mocking. They stood respectfully, their eyes filled with genuine curiosity. One of the girls, with a notebook clutched to her chest, finally spoke. "Miss Angela, how did you learn all this? Did you always want to be a janitor?" Angela froze for a moment. The question was innocent, but it touched a wound deep inside her. She put down the cloth in her hands and took a slow breath. She could have brushed it off, could have given them a quick answer and sent them away. But something inside her told her it was time to share the truth. "I wasn't always a janitor," she said softly, her eyes distant. "When I was your age, I wanted to be a mathematician. Numbers. They always made sense to me. When the world was confusing, math was clear. It was like music, like poetry, something beautiful that never failed me." The students leaned closer, listening carefully. "I was accepted into a university when I was young," she continued, a faint smile forming as she remembered. "I had a scholarship. People believed in me. I thought my future was waiting there, filled with equations and discoveries. But then, life changed. My parents fell sick. Medical bills grew. And someone had to care for my younger brothers and sisters. I couldn't leave them. So I stayed. I worked jobs during the day, studied at night, but eventually, I couldn't keep up. I gave up my place at the university so my family could survive." Her voice trembled slightly, though she tried to steady it. "I told myself I'd go back one day, but days turned into years. And now, here I am." Silence filled the room. The students weren't sure what to say. For them, it was hard to imagine someone with such brilliance being forced to put her dreams away. Finally, the girl with the notebook whispered, "That's not fair." Angela smiled sadly. "Life isn't always fair, but giving up my dream to take care of my family wasn't a mistake. I don't regret it. They needed me, and I found peace in that. But," she looked at the chalkboard across the room, "sometimes I wonder what might have been." Her story spread even faster than her talent with math. Now the whispers weren't just about the janitor solving calculus. They were about her sacrifice, her hidden past, and the life she could have lived. For the students, it was more than gossip. It was a lesson. Many of them complained about school, about homework, about how hard math was. But here was a woman who would have given anything to sit in their seats again, to hold the opportunities they took for granted. Even some teachers were moved. A few began to look at Angela with newfound respect. They realized the truth, that knowledge does not belong only to those with degrees or titles. It belongs to anyone who has the courage to pursue it, no matter where life takes them. But there was one person who could not bear the change: Mr. Wallace. Every time he saw students gathered around Angela, his pride burned. He had built his reputation on being the authority in mathematics, the one voice students listened to. Now his authority was slipping, not because Angela wanted it, but because she had something he didn't: heart. One afternoon, as Angela walked down the hallway carrying her supplies, Mr. Wallace blocked her path. "Enough is enough," he said sharply. "You're turning this school into a circus. The students are here to learn from their teachers, not from the janitor." Angela met his glare with calm eyes. "I never asked for this, Mr. Wallace. The students came to me. I only answered their questions. If helping them is wrong, then I suppose I'm guilty." His face reddened. "You're overstepping. You're embarrassing this institution." Before Angela could reply, a voice interrupted. It was Daniel, the shy boy who had first asked her for help. He stepped forward, holding his math test proudly in his hand. "She's not embarrassing the school," Daniel said, his voice trembling, but firm. "She's saving us. Look at this. I passed for the first time because she explained it to me. She makes us believe we can do it. You don't." Other students joined him, holding their tests, their books, their papers. "She helps us," one of them said. "She cares." For a moment, Mr. Wallace stood frozen, speechless. The voices of his students cut deeper than Angela's quiet defiance ever could. He turned away without another word, leaving Angela standing among the students who now looked at her not as a janitor, but as something far greater. That night, Angela walked home with tears in her eyes. Not of sadness, but of something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Her story was no longer just her own. It was now a light for others, proof that greatness could come from the most unexpected places. And somewhere deep inside, the dream. she had buried for so many years began to stir again. It whispered to her that perhaps it wasn't too late, that maybe her story was only just beginning. By now, the library had turned into something more than just a place for books. Every afternoon it became a quiet classroom, filled with students eager to learn from Angela. She never advertised herself, never asked anyone to come, yet the numbers grew each day. Students who once skipped math assignments now sat on the floor with notebooks open, hanging on to her words. She explained concepts in a way that felt alive, weaving stories into equations and breaking problems into steps so clear that even the most discouraged student began to believe they could succeed. Angela felt both joy and hesitation. She loved helping the children, but she couldn't shake the thought that this wasn't her place. She wasn't a teacher, at least not officially. She was a janitor with a mop and bucket. Yet when she saw the way their eyes lit up with understanding, she couldn't deny what her heart told her. This was who she was meant to be all along. It wasn't long before the principal, Mrs. Jenkins, heard the whispers. At first she assumed it was just teenage exaggeration, but the reports kept piling up. The janitor teaching calculus, the students suddenly passing tests, the buzz spreading through the whole school. Curiosity got the better of her, and one late afternoon she quietly stepped into the library. The sight that greeted her made her pause. Angela stood at the board, chalk in hand, her back straight, her voice gentle but confident. Around her, students leaned forward eagerly, their eyes focused, their notebooks filled with scribbles and underlines. No one was distracted. No one was dozing off. Every single one of them was engaged. Mrs. Jenkins stayed until the session ended. When the students finally left, buzzing with excitement, she approached Angela, who was erasing the board with quiet care. "You've created something remarkable here," the principal said softly. Angela turned, startled. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. They just kept asking for help." Mrs. Jenkins smiled warmly. "Trouble? Angela, you're doing what many of my teachers struggle to do. You're inspiring them. That is no small thing." She studied her for a moment, then added, "You ever think about teaching?" "Officially?" Angela laughed softly, shaking her head. "That was once a dream a long time ago. But life, it had other plans." The principal didn't press further, but her words lingered. Over the next few days, she made some calls, spoke to colleagues, and reached out to a friend she knew at the local university. Something inside her told her that Angela's talent couldn't be left hidden any longer. A week later, Angela was asked to meet someone in the principal's office. Nervously, she walked in, her uniform freshly pressed, her hands still smelling faintly of soap and cleaning solution. Sitting beside Mrs. Jenkins was a tall man in a gray suit, his eyes kind but sharp with intelligence. "Angela," the principal began, "this is Professor Charles Whitman from the university. I told him about you, and he wanted to meet you, himself." Angela froze, her heart thumping in her chest. She glanced at the professor, unsure what to say. Professor Whitman leaned forward, smiling gently. "I've heard quite a story about you. A janitor who solves calculus problems and teaches high schoolers with the ease of a trained educator. That's not something I could ignore." Angela shook her head quickly. "It's nothing like that. I just help them understand. That's all." Whitman chuckled. "That's more than just. May I ask you something?" He pulled a notebook from his briefcase and opened it to a page filled with equations. "Would you mind showing me how you'd approach this?" Her eyes fell on the page. For a moment, she hesitated, old fears tugging at her. She was not supposed to be here, not supposed to be doing this. But then something steadied her. She picked up the pen and began. Slowly at first, then more confidently, she broke down the problem, explaining her thought process as she wrote. When she finished, she set the pen down and looked away, embarrassed. "I don't know if that's what you were expecting." "Professor," Whitman's smile widened. "That's exactly what I was expecting. You didn't just solve it, you taught it. That's the mark of a true mathematician and a true teacher." Angela's cheeks warmed, and she shook her head again, still reluctant to believe. But the professor continued. "Angela, talent like Yours doesn't disappear. It waits. And when the time is right, it finds its way back. I'd like to offer you something, a chance to take classes at the university on scholarship. You have a gift. It deserves to be nurtured. Her breath caught in her throat. A scholarship? Classes? After all these years? She wanted to speak, to accept, to scream yes. But her fears held her back. I don't know if I can. I've been out of school for so long, and I still need this job. I need to live, to survive. Mrs. Jenkins reached over, her voice gentle but firm. Angela, sometimes life gives us a second chance. Don't let fear stop you from taking it. That night, Angela walked home with her thoughts in chaos. The streets felt different, the lights brighter, the air heavier with possibility. She remembered the little girl who used to sit at the kitchen table solving puzzles late into the night. She remembered the day she got her university acceptance letter, the pride in her parents' eyes, the dreams she had carried so close to her heart. She thought about the years of scrubbing floors, the long nights of exhaustion, the sacrifices she had made without complaint. And now, after everything, was life really offering her a way back? The next morning, she stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. She didn't see just a janitor anymore. She saw someone who had endured, someone who had carried burdens and still kept her mind sharp. She saw resilience. For the first time in years, she whispered to herself, "Maybe I still can." The decision was not easy. She wrestled with doubts, with practical concerns, with the weight of her responsibilities. But deep down she knew the truth. Opportunities like this didn't come twice. And so, a week later, Angela walked onto the university campus, not as a visitor, not as someone who had lost her chance, but as a student reborn. Her uniform was replaced by simple clothes, her mop and bucket left behind. She carried only a notebook and a pen, her heart pounding with nervous excitement. As she stepped into her first lecture, she sat among students half her age, feeling out of place yet determined. When the professor began writing on the board, Angela's eyes lit up. The numbers danced again, the equations sang, and for the first time in decades she felt whole. Back at the high school, the students waited eagerly for news. When they learned Angela had been given a scholarship, cheers erupted. To them, she wasn't just their janitor anymore. She was their hero, their living proof that it's never too late to chase a dream. But for Angela, this was only the beginning. The day Angela officially became a university student was one of the proudest moments of her life. She walked through the campus gates with her books pressed tightly against her chest, her heart both nervous and hopeful. Around her, young students hurried to classes, laughing, chatting, and carrying the weight of futures they still had time to shape. Angela felt out of place at first. She was older, dressed more modestly, and her hands still bore the faint calluses from years of work. But inside, she knew she belonged. Numbers did not care about age. Equations did not care about status. Knowledge welcomed anyone willing to seek it. Back at the high school, her absence from afternoon library sessions left a gap. But instead of disappointment, the students celebrated her. They spoke about her in the hallways, retelling her story with pride as if they were part of something greater. Some teachers, once doubtful, began to use her story to encourage their own classes. If Angela can return to her studies after all these years, what excuse do you have for giving up? Her name became more than just a whisper. It became a symbol. Within weeks, the story reached beyond the school. A local newspaper picked it up. Janitor stuns students with calculus skills, earns university scholarship. Soon after, a reporter came to interview her. Angela hesitated at first, uncomfortable with the attention, but Mrs. Jenkins convinced her. "Your story isn't just yours anymore," she reminded her. "It belongs to everyone who needs hope." The article spread quickly. Other news outlets picked it up, and soon Angela's quiet life was thrust into a spotlight she had never expected. Strangers recognized her on the street, offering words of encouragement. Parents wrote letters thanking her for inspiring their children. Former students reached out, confessing how her story had reignited their own ambitions. Many, she became proof that it was never too late, that no dream was too far gone. Despite the fame, Angela remained humble. She still worked part-time at the school, cleaning halls in the mornings before heading to her university lectures. She still greeted the students with the same gentle smile, still carried herself with quiet dignity. But inside, something had changed. She no longer saw herself as invisible. She was walking in the light now, and she carried that light for others to see. Months passed, and Angela thrived at the university. Her professors were astonished at her sharpness, her ability to not only solve problems but to explain them with clarity that even they admired. Younger students often gathered around her after class asking for help, much like the high school students once had. She never turned anyone away. Teaching had become as natural to her as breathing. One evening, the university held a seminar where distinguished speakers were invited to share their journeys. To her surprise, Angela was asked to speak. She stood nervously at the podium, the bright lights of the auditorium shining on her face, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the microphone. "I was once a girl who dreamed of numbers," she began softly. "But life forced me to put that dream aside. For years I cleaned floors, telling myself my time had passed. But then, a chalkboard, a problem, and a moment of truth reminded me that dreams do not die. They wait, and when the moment comes, they rise again." The room was silent, hanging on her every word. Some students wiped tears from their eyes. Professors nodded solemnly, and the applause that followed shook the hall. Angela realized then that her story was bigger than herself. It was about resilience, about second chances, about the hidden genius in people the world overlooks.